Mental Health in Bermuda. MWI is the only inpatient psychiatric facility on island. Currently, we service not just for mental health, but we also do for substance abuse, for child and adolescents, and learning disability. So MWI covers those 4 direct programs. In reference to specifically forensic services, one of our adult psychiatrists, and currently he is a forensic psychiatrist, services Westgate, Co-Ed, and the farm on a weekly basis and has clinics there to do assessments on anybody who is deemed having mental health issues. Unfortunately, because of Bermuda's size, we are not able to supply high, secure forensic services. If you, internationally, there are facilities such as Rampton and Broadmoor in the United Kingdom that Bermuda has used for high, secure forensic services. Here in Bermuda, most of the clients that we service do not fit that category on a routine basis that are currently in Westgate. However, if somebody is deemed in need of high security, the Bermuda government, along with corrections and mental health, have collaborated to determine a treatment plan for that individual. And usually they are sent overseas. They have done in the past. Recently, there have been cases, however, we have not been able to secure placement in a UK facility. But the clients who currently are in Westgate who suffer with mental health issues on a regular basis are seen by a psychiatrist. They have a medical hospital clinic in the prison with nurses who have psychiatric experience who also follow up the clients while they're in Westgate. If a patient in Westgate becomes acutely ill, then they are transferred to mental health, which is MWI, and their acute symptoms are treated with the partnership with the corrections from a security point of view. Soon as they're stabilized, they are then transferred back to the prison. So in terms of access, we have an ongoing relationship with the corrections department to ensure that the client's mental health needs are dealt with and met. Currently, we have, I think it's about 6 people in Westgate at the moment who are deemed in need of additional psychiatric or mental health services. The conversations are ongoing with the government of Bermuda, Corrections, and Mid-Atlantic Wellness Institute on how best to service these clients going forward. Unfortunately, we are not at a position where we can build financially a unit to sustain them ongoing. So these discussions have been ongoing with Corrections, the Ministry of Health, and MWI to meet their needs. That's a quick overview of what services are currently available. We base our service delivery on the Mental Health Act, which Judge Wolf is very familiar with. We have been very much appreciative of the support of the courts and the court services with the introduction of the Mental Health Treatment Court. So we have partnered with them to try and limit, can I say, the recidivism of people going back and forth between the prison and MWI. And so far, it's still in its pilot stage, but we're hoping that that too will be helped to meet the needs of the clients who have mental health issues.
Thank you, Ms. Dill. I'm going to ask the panelists to, keeping in mind whether services are available, accessible, affordable, and coordinated, so we have a seamless system of services, to focus on what support services, assistance is available to help persons with mental health conditions live independently in our community. What services, of course, are provided through Mid-Atlantic, which we've touched on already? What form of financial assistance is available to persons with mental health conditions? And lastly, how and why was the mental health court established? Again, focusing on whether these things are readily available, accessible. Do they actually work? Are they affordable? Perhaps we'll start with financial assistance first.
Sure, why not?
The money lady.
The money, people, follow the money. Okay, first of all, before I even make comment as to how financial assistance works with clients who may have mental disabilities, I want to preface whatever I say by saying that I myself was an inpatient psychiatric clinical social worker for 12 years at the largest mental health hospital in the tri-state area in the States. And I used to always wonder, why am I here? You know, I wanted to work with children, and that job wasn't available, so you end up working in an inpatient psychiatric 7-story building, okay? So I think after 12 years, I have been, I'm very emotional, I'm very keen on my observances with all of our clients that come into the Department of Financial Assistance who may have mental disabilities, and encourage my staff to also pick those things up. And so it's not something that you just say, oh, those people. It's a person, and we have to deal with that. So, having said that, the total number right now, and I did just put some numbers together for this presentation just before I came. We have 2,665 persons that are on financial assistance. That does not include the Child Daycare Allowance Program. And of those persons, 779 are disabled clients. Of the 779, 35%, or 280 persons, have mental challenges or disabilities, ranging anywhere from schizophrenia, like we're saying here, bipolar affective disorder, mental retardation, depression, cognitive impairment, and even Down syndrome. The agency right now is paying about $1.276 million to assist this population on a monthly basis. And some of these costs would include $115,000 monthly for disability allowance, which is an allowance that persons who have mental disabilities who remain in the household of others will qualify right off the bat for $650 a month on top of their insurance. So we would pay another $6,000 to $7,000 for equipment or services that they may need. We also would pay up to $30,000, and these are monthly figures, $30,000 a month for living accommodations currently. Another basically $10,000 for insurance premiums. Anybody that's on financial assistance, we will pay for HIP or future care for you depending on your age. And of course, you know, if you have HIP, there is no medication attached to that, so we would also pay for any medication that a patient or client would need. So basically what we see is about 5 to 8 persons coming in on a monthly basis that would have mental disabilities applying for financial assistance at this point. And I think we just recently had a meeting with my good friend Carla out there and Mr. Rogers, and Mr. Rogers in Pittsburgh, there was another Mr. Rogers, but anyway. And I see Sharon and Patrice. You know, we have to maintain good communication and collaboration between agencies. I also see court services out there. I mean, the Department of Financial Assistance, as most of you would know, deal with a lot of different populations. And the bottom line for me in terms of dealing with servicing financially anybody is understanding where they are, and it's all about communication.
Good evening, everyone. So I have 2 confessions to make. One is that the courts historically have been quite abysmal in how we have actually been dealing with persons who have mental illness and have found themselves in the court system. We've had pretty much one answer, and that is to lock them up. That might be okay for some people. It might have assuaged some of our desires to just put people away and just, put them on the carpet and just leave them. The problem with that, though, is that persons with mental illness would commit an offense and they would get locked up, and they'll come out, they'll do their time, they'll get out, come back into society, commit another offense, get locked up again. You see the picture I'm painting? It's a very sort of fast revolving door. So clearly, it wasn't working. My second confession is this, is that I, like probably 95% of the population of Bermuda, held some really dangerous views about persons with mental illness. When I was growing up, the place you didn't want to go, or the place where you would joke about, was St. Brendan's. And so we treated persons with mental illness in a way which was very degrading. And I carried that into my not my judicial life, but certainly my legal life. And so it was clear to me that there had to be a change. And it was sort of brought into focus for me when someone explained to me that, and I think that Mr. Rogers said earlier, that we have to start looking at mental health in the same way we look at physical health. We have to look at mental illness in the same way that we look at physical illness. So if a person breaks a leg or something happens, they go to the hospital and they get fixed up and medication if necessary, and everything's fine. I think we need to have that same sort of approach. So over the years, and listening to the young lady from corrections talking about a forensic unit, join the chorus. You've been here for 6 months. That conversation's been going on for at least 15 years. So welcome. Get in the back. And so over the last few years, it's been percolating about how are we going to actually deal with persons who find themselves in the system who have mental illness. Now, let me just make it very clear. The vast majority of persons who have mental illness do not find themselves in the court, but some do. Some who come to court don't know what they're doing. They don't know that what they're doing is illegal. And there are some who actually have an idea that what they're doing is wrong. And so for the last few years, there's been this idea that's going around about how are we going to deal with a person with mental illness in the court system. And from America sort of about 25 years ago formed the drug treatment court. And from that sort of spawned other types of treatment court, one of which was mental health court. And so in October 2013, we started the pilot program of mental health court. And it's been going now fairly strongly. And I think that I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the yeoman-type efforts of Ms. Kelly Medeiros, who has been, been leading the charge for the formation of the mental health court. We had our naysayers in the beginning. I think people were warming up to it, and Kelly was very much instrumental in pioneering the efforts of mental health court. So I give her a great deal of respect and recognition for that. I also want to acknowledge the efforts of Mr. Saul Dismont, who is the defense counsel in mental health court. He makes sure that the person's legal rights are observed and taken care of. And I see back there, they call him Froggy. I don't know his real name. What's his name? Ashwick? Yes, geez, okay. He is the representative from MWI, who is also part of the, I do apologize about corrections, who's a part of the mental health court team. And so it's been in his pilot phase for the last, it's supposed to be for 1 year, but it's now a year and a half. And it is an multidisciplinary approach to how we deal with persons with mental illness rather than locking them up. And so on a weekly basis, on Thursdays, we have mental health court, which is presided over by Magistrate Nicole Stoneham. And we meet as a team to discuss the different roles that we have in mental health court to try and come up with a treatment plan, a judicial plan, a corrections plan as to how we can manage these individuals. It's a phased approach, but it's one in which is very specialized and very structured. And so far, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly or Saul, how many people we have now? 19? 19 in paper. And so, and the vast majority of them extremely well. They're not committing any further offenses. They're in various stages of the program, and they're presenting with various types of mental illness, ranging from schizophrenia, personality disorders, what else? Depression, and so on and so forth. And so we think it's working. We think it's one of the best things in the criminal justice system. We are, stopping the recidivism of those who are suffering from mental health illness. And we're also, I think, ultimately helping society. We're also helping individuals have a structured life. And so we're quite proud of what we're doing. I think it is playing a very huge role in destigmatizing, I'm not even sure if that's a word, but destigmatizing how mental health, mental illness persons, and it's also, I think, providing a new look in how we treat offenders. It was quite interesting to hear that 1 in 4 people in Bermuda may be presenting with mental illness, and I truly believe, and it was only through mental health court that I came to actually realize that there is a fine line between those persons who have mental illness and persons who think they don't have mental illness. And so I'm quite encouraged by the collaborative efforts of the courts, corrections, court services, defense counsel, prosecutors. We tend to always want to operate in our own little silos, and really nothing actually gets done, rather than sort of like, tapping into other disciplines. And I'm also very encouraged by meetings we have had with Ms. Deal and her team at MWI. And so we look forward to working with them. We're very excited about mental health court, and we think we're providing a great service.
Thank you. I, in my career as a public servant, remember the debate and discussion about the establishment of a mental health court and the difficult challenge that people faced in trying to bring this about. So it's nice to hear of a success story. I'm going to ask if there are any other comments from the audience at this point. But before we do, I would remind you that at the end we'll have an open question and answer session with the microphone. But please, if you think of another question, write it down. Thank you. Sir?
Hi, my name is Carl Otterbridge. I've struggled with mental illness my entire life. I actually used to work in the reinsurance business at an extremely high level. Something happened. I had a traumatic event that happened that triggered some past episodes from my past. And never would I have imagined that I would be someone who ends up living on financial assistance and who pays for my medication. But also at the same time, I've also gotten to see what it's like to be out there actually trying to get the right care. And it almost seems like a curse to know what your issues are. But when you go out there to try to find the appropriate help, it really isn't quite there. I almost feel like as if I was someone that has full-blown schizophrenia, yeah, I would be okay. But it seems like there's a gap for people who can function in society but have issues like post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. And also, I've experienced what it's like to be discriminated against in the employment arena. I worked for one company where they hired me knowing I had a mental health issue. Working for another company, flat out discriminated against. So I do support and agree with a lot of things you're saying up there, but there does need to be more work done.
My editorial comment. I think this again highlights the difficulty where we have separate systems that don't really integrate. We have a medical care system, which most people think of as the healthcare system, a public health system, a hospital system, and a mental health system. But if they integrated and communicated, we'd really think in terms of prevention, screening, early diagnosis, and treatment, and appropriate follow-up. And I think if we keep that in mind, then we can build towards a system that actually ensures that people get help as early as possible, get identified as needing help as early as possible, and actually get the help. This leads me to the final part of this discussion. I'd ask the panelists, what more can be done to actually ensure that people with mental health conditions and some question about their mental wellness can go on to lead a more controlled or structured life, to use the word of Mr. Wolf. Any comments, any thoughts? What more can we do as a community and as your individual institutions?
I think one of the first things, and I thought the mic would stop with Mr. Henson, because one of the first things that needs to happen is that we need to have some type of human rights for persons with mental disabilities.
I didn't want to get on my horse and start into it, but it's really fascinating hearing stories of direct discrimination, and it's the whole reason why the current system, or our current Human Rights Act 981, is so terrible in this regard. I mean, the starkest example I can give is there are international businesses on this island that are owned by shareholders and whose goal is to make money and profit. And in my private practice, I read their handbooks as to how they should treat their staff. And they have more protection in their handbook than we have in our own statute. It's just flabbergasting to me. I quite frankly, I don't understand it. I appreciate the point about communication between all the different bodies, but we can't do anything until the law is changed. There's simply no wiggle room there. We can only throw our hands up in despair when another person comes in and says they've been discriminated against on the grounds of their mental health, as they've been doing for 35 years since the 1981 Act came into force. Trying to get the message out, this kind of panel discussion is fantastic for that. I don't mean to give it too much of a negative spin, because most of the stories and anecdotes here are positive. But we shouldn't be under any doubt how behind the times we actually are here. And I think there is a massive misunderstanding in the community about how bad it actually is. If you talk to an international, someone coming down to work here, the fact that we don't have protection for those with mental health is hard to understand. It doesn't even compute on the social side. The fantastic stories about the medical care we can give and the health court, etc., are all great. But to truly integrate into society, you need to be treated equally. That's the fundamental position here. And when I've raised this comment, and we were put into our roles over 2 years ago, in the first meeting, the first comment I raised with the then minister and the then attorney general was mental health. And it's something we have raised continuously for 2 years since then. And whenever I speak about it to anyone in any meeting, the only pushback I ever get is based on ignorance or a misunderstanding. There's never been any reason given to me, a fundamental logical reason, as to why Bermuda is, and there's no exaggeration to say, 35 years behind the times. No one's ever given me a correct reason, and I'm amazed. And I think people in this room, from my perspective and from the commissioner's perspective, we need pressure to change law, and that pressure has got to be applied direct at source. It's got to be applied to the politicians. So, when I get up in the morning and I read in the Gazette the front pages about an argument about who insulted who in the house, it's upsetting. It's really upsetting. Because really the question should be, why can't someone have an equal opportunity to gain gainful employment if they're suffering from mental illness? That's the question.
Mr. Hanson doesn't mind me getting on his horse with him. It's truly bizarre to me that we can have 1 in 4 persons in Bermuda who are presenting with some level of mental illness and it not be deemed to be an epidemic. I mean, some other sort of physical illness would be like we'd be up in arms, even on the front page of the Royal Gazette or any other newspaper. And the fact that we don't have laws in place that protect persons in the workplace or otherwise, in terms of discrimination for persons who have suffered mental illness, is absolutely abysmal in a country or a place in which we pride ourselves on supposed to being so progressive. So I hope that the efforts of the Human Rights Commission are really brought to bear for those politicians or whoever needs to be told and persuaded and cajoled and pushed and prodded, and it needs to happen real soon.
While the mic's going down, I'll just make a comment. As I sat and listened to the panelists, as a former public health practitioner and a chief medical officer, I actually felt embarrassed I didn't know what question I was formulating in my own head. But if we expect politicians and policymakers to work on good scientific data, good evidence, we really don't have. And the thought occurred to me, there probably are great disparities in health for persons with mental health conditions. Does their diabetes get taken care of to the same quality and level of the person who doesn't have a mental health condition? When they have a cardiovascular disease, does the care and management get rendered in the same way that it would for others? I would venture to guess that it doesn't, because there are probably barriers between the medical health system, the client, and their carers. That makes me think that that's something I should have known as a public health practitioner. It just highlights for me the need for us to have better data, better information on the status of mental health in Bermuda and the situation that people with mental health conditions find themselves in. Just my plug.
And I can piggyback off of that, because one of the things that the National Accessibility Advisory Council is pushing for is a national registry of disabilities, so that we can know a little bit more about the statistics that are out there, statistics that are out there, so that we can better formulate programs going forward. But I also just wanted to, the council also has been pushing to the ministers in regards to the amendments to the Human Rights Commission's definition of disability, and we've done so many times. So it's going to take someone with great political will to get this through, but it's definitely it's wrong. It's wrong. But I just want to also highlight, I'm an occupational therapist by profession, and we have humble beginnings as a profession working in the field of mental health. That's how our profession started. And I just wanted to highlight the importance of employment, and particularly in this time, it's a difficult time for able-bodied people to find employment. And then we have the stigma of persons with mental illnesses having to look for employment as well. And I just wanted to share a quote, because occupation in its own right also helps people to rehabilitate. And there's a quote by an occupational therapist, it's Mary Riley, that says, "Man, through the use of his hands, as they are energized by mind and will, can influence the state of his own health." And there's such great value in employment, and I think we are right now at a crisis, in a crisis state when it does come to employment. So I think we would find great benefit in revolutionizing our, what's available out there for employment opportunities.
mental illness is a major stigma in Bermuda. And I understand now why. If you have no protection, you're not going to come out and say, I have a mental illness. Why is it that Catherine Zeta-Jones can come out and say that I have bipolar? Why is it that other stars and sports persons can come out and say, I suffer from a mental illness? They have protection of their countries. But if you look at Bermuda, the only people that you would think has mental illness are the persons that probably look as though they have a mental illness. But again, if 1 in 4 persons have mental illness, then there is more than just the person who may be walking around begging. There are people working in offices. Your doctor, your lawyer. But he's not going to tell you that because he doesn't have any protection either. So he's not going to say anything. So as long as that remains a problem, then mental illness will remain a major problem in Bermuda. You can't even apply for a job because if you want to be honest and they say, have you ever suffered with a mental illness? You can say, I better be honest. Yes. Okay, I'm sorry you weren't able to get the job.
Yep. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. Carl, we have to, people like you and I, who have these conditions, we have to continue to be the squeaky wheel. Bermuda, the Mental Health Foundation has recently gone to a number of schools to talk to children about mental health. We need to go into the international companies and penetrate their HR departments. No one's going to go to their HR department and say, I need help, if they feel that that is going to prevent them from moving ahead in their job or cause them an issue or become discriminated against. That prevents people from seeking treatment. As a result, they may turn to other things which could be more dangerous. They could start to self-medicate, become an obsessive drinker or whatever. People need to feel free to be honest, just as they would if they were having a diabetic issue or a cardiovascular issue. The conversation should be that comfortable. You should be able to go to your employer and be very honest and say, I think I need some help here, and not feel like it's going to come back and bite you in the end.
I think just sort of rounding this out in a way, this is an extremely simple issue. You know, we're talking about adding a word to the Human Rights Act. We're not talking about a huge cost and having to rejig the whole thing. We're talking about adding mental next to physical. That is all this is about. You know, political will, I just don't understand why that's required. It's literally putting a word into the act. It should just simply be done. And this is a classic example of, if there is no law protecting, people will not change. You know, people will not say, I'm not hiring you because you're black, because it's discrimination and it is unlawful. It is that simple. There is no need to overthink this in any way. It's a very easy thing to get right and a very easy thing to change, and the impact will be very, very dramatic, which is why I'm so puzzled that it's 2015 and we're still in the same position we were as is 1981.